June 1979, UCLA Medical Center, Los Angeles. A man is dying in a hospital bed. He has stomach cancer. He weighs barely 150 pounds. His hands, the same hands that once gripped a rifle in over 200 films, are trembling. His sons are by his side. And somewhere in Washington, inside a classified government document that won't be made public for years, a Pentagon official has written 7 words that will change everything we thought we knew about this man. 7 words. We'll get to those words, but first you need to understand what was being protected and why. His real name was Marion Robert Morrison, born in Winterset, Iowa in 1907. Not exactly the name you'd put on a movie poster, but Marion would become something far bigger than any name. He would become a symbol. He would become America itself, or at least the version of America that people wanted to believe in. Broad shoulders, square jaw, a walk that screenwriters described as a controlled swagger, a voice that made men want to stand up straighter. John Wayne didn't just play heroes, he was supposed to be one. And that was exactly the problem. Because the thing about carefully constructed myths is that somewhere, underneath all that bronze and celluloid and patriotic music, there is always a man. And men have secrets. John Wayne had one that Hollywood, the United States government, and the most powerful producers in the film industry spent decades making sure you would never find out about. If you've been watching this channel, you know we don't do surface-level stories, so stick with us, because what you're about to hear is not rumor, it's documented, it's devastating, and it explains exactly how a legend can be built on top of a lie. Marion Morrison got his nickname, Duke, from a dog, a large Arendelle Terrier he walked around his neighborhood as a kid. Firefighters at a local station started calling the boy Little Duke after the dog. The name stuck. The boy grew, the dog is forgotten. The Duke lived forever. But before the Duke, there was something that haunted Marion Morrison every single day of his adult life. Something he almost never spoke about publicly. Something that contradicted everything the John Wayne image was built upon. He never served in World War II. Let that sink in for a moment. The most famous action hero in American cinema history, the face of American military toughness, the man who single-handedly, on screen, fought the Japanese, the Germans, the Communists, the Comanches, never once put on a real uniform, never saw real combat, while Jimmy Stewart flew bombing missions over Germany, while Clark Gable enlisted at 41 years old, while Henry Fonda served in the Navy, John Wayne stayed in Hollywood and made movies about it. He wasn't a coward. He tried to enlist. The military rejected him. He was 34, had a family, and had a shoulder injury. But Wayne never accepted that. According to those close to him, the guilt followed him everywhere. His third wife later said he talked about it in his sleep. He compensated by making himself the loudest, most aggressive voice for American military power in Hollywood history. The more aggressively patriotic he became in public, the less he had to face what he felt in private. And then, the compensation became something darker. By the late 1940s, John Wayne wasn't just an actor, he was a political operator. He became president of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, a group dedicated to hunting down anyone in Hollywood suspected of communist sympathies. And when the House Un-American Activities Committee began its investigations, John Wayne was one of its most enthusiastic supporters. He didn't just support it, he helped it. He gave names. He sat in rooms with investigators and pointed fingers at colleagues. People lost their careers. Some lost everything. And John Wayne, the man who never served, who never sacrificed anything real, stood there in his cowboy hat and called it patriotism. In 1971, He gave an interview to Playboy magazine. He was 63 years old. He said things that would end any career today, about race, about what he believed, about who deserved what in America. The interview was buried. Not literally, it was published, but the industry looked the other way, because John Wayne was John Wayne, and certain men in certain eras were simply too big to cancel. But none of this, not the WW2 guilt, not the blacklisting, not the interview, is the real secret that Hollywood spent 50 years protecting. The real secret began in 1954, in Utah desert, and it ends with a body count. Howard Hughes, eccentric billionaire, aviation pioneer, obsessive madman, decided he wanted to make an epic film. He had the money, he had the star. What he needed was a location. His production team found it. Snow Canyon, Utah. Spectacular red rock formations, dramatic landscape. It looked, they said, like Mongolia. Perfect for their film, which would tell the story of Genghis Khan. There was one detail the production team noted and then apparently decided to ignore. Snow Canyon was located 137 miles downwind from the Nevada test site, the place where the United States government had been detonating nuclear weapons. In 1953 alone, just 1 year before cameras rolled, 11 atomic bombs had been detonated there as part of Operation Upshot Knothole. The mushroom clouds rose tens of thousands of feet into the sky. The wind carried the fallout east, directly over St. George, Utah, directly over Snow Canyon. The Atomic Energy Commission told everyone it was safe. Residents believed them. Ranchers whose sheep were dying believed them. And Howard Hughes believed them. Or at least he chose to. John Wayne arrived on set in the summer of 1954. He brought his sons. Michael and Patrick came to visit their famous father on location, the way kids do. They played in the red sand, they climbed on the rocks. Someone handed young Patrick a Geiger counter as a novelty, a toy almost. The counter went berserk, making so much noise that Wayne looked at it and assumed it was broken. It was not broken. The cast and crew spent weeks in that soil, breathing that dust. The 220 people who worked on the Conqueror, cast, crew, extras, went home to their lives after filming wrapped. They went back to Hollywood. They made other movies. They raised their families. And then, one by one, they started getting sick. Susan Hayward, brain cancer. Pedro Armendariz, kidney cancer, terminal. He received his diagnosis while still working on another film. He checked into a hospital and, unable to face what was coming, took his own life. Dick Powell, the director, lymphoma, dead at 58. Agnes Moorehead, uterine cancer. She had never smoked a cigarette in her life, never drank alcohol, was meticulous about her health. It didn't matter. Lee Van Cleef, throat cancer. John Wayne, first lung cancer in 1964, he had one lung removed and told the world he had beaten it. Then stomach cancer came for him 15 years later and finished what the first diagnosis started. And Wayne's sons. Patrick had a benign tumor removed from his breast. Michael developed skin cancer. They had visited the set as children, playing in the sand. By 1980, a journalist at People magazine ran the numbers. Of the 220 people who worked on the Conqueror, 91 had developed cancer, 46 had died from it. In a random group of 220 people, doctors would expect approximately 30 cancer cases over a lifetime. The Conqueror cast and crew had 3 times that number. Dr. Robert Pendleton, director of radiological health at the University of Utah, looked at those statistics and said publicly, "With these numbers, this case could qualify as an epidemic." And here is where Howard Hughes enters the story for the last time. In the early 1970s, Hughes, now reclusive, half-mad, locked in hotel rooms with the curtains drawn, began to understand what had happened. He was the one who had approved the location. He was the one who had been told there might be risk and chosen to proceed anyway. And he had done something else, something almost incomprehensible. After location filming ended, he ordered 60 tons of soil from Snow Canyon to be packed up and trucked to the RKO studio lot in Hollywood. 60 tons of radioactive dirt brought to a closed soundstage so that the interior scenes would visually match the exterior ones. The cast breathed that dust twice, first in Utah, then in Hollywood. Hughes felt, in his own words, guilty as hell. He spent $12 million buying every existing print of The Conqueror, every copy. He didn't want anyone to see it. He sat alone in his hotel suite and watched it on a loop, over and over, in the dark, until he died in 1976. And the United States government, they knew. They had known for years what the fallout was doing to communities across Nevada and Utah. They had internal documents, they had data, and they said nothing. They continued to assure the public that everything was fine. They watched people die. They protected the nuclear testing program. They protected the image of American strength. And in doing so, they protected the image of the man who had become the face of that strength. Inside one of those classified documents, a scientist from the Pentagon's Defense Nuclear Agency wrote the 7 words we mentioned at the beginning. After learning about the cancer rates among the Conqueror's cast and crew, he wrote, "Please God, don't let us have killed John Wayne." Not, "Please God, don't let us have killed all these people." Not the director, not the actress who never smoked, not the man who killed himself rather than face his diagnosis. John Wayne, the symbol, the icon. That was what they were worried about protecting. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was finally signed into law in 1990, 11 years after Wayne died. By then, 34,000 people had filed claims. The government paid out over $2 billion in compensation to downwinders, the communities that had been living under those mushroom clouds for decades, people who had been told for 40 years that they were fine. John Wayne himself never accepted that the Conqueror was responsible for his cancer. He blamed his cigarettes, and he did smoke 6 packs a day, so the cigarettes deserve some credit. But Agnes Moorehead didn't smoke. Agnes Moorehead didn't drink. Agnes Moorehead did everything right, and she still died. In June of 1979, at the UCLA Medical Center, Marion Robert Morrison, the Duke, the legend, the face of American cinema, died of stomach cancer at 72 years old. 40,000 people sent flowers. The President of the United States called it a loss for the entire nation. The Conqueror is available to watch today. Hughes's copies are gone, but the film survived. It is widely considered one of the worst movies ever made. Wayne himself shuddered whenever anyone mentioned it. He once said the moral of the film was simple: don't make an ass of yourself trying to play parts you're not suited for. He meant the casting, but maybe, without knowing it, he was talking about something else entirely. The part he played his whole life, the invincible American, the man nothing could touch. Something touched him, something invisible, carried on the wind across 137 miles of desert. And Hollywood and the government that made it possible made sure you wouldn't find out for 50 years.